Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be doing the full review of the Diablo Immortal Alpha in its current state. So first off, let's go ahead and go over a bunch of things rapid fire really quick, and then we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit more about my thoughts on the current systems in the game. So first off, in terms of a bunch of things to get out of the way that a lot of you guys might be wondering with this game, currently keep in mind that this is the alpha, so things may actually change. There is no autoplay in the game. There is, however, an auto move to an NPC. The game does not have a hardcore mode, and it will also have a marketplace. Now, if you guys want to learn more about kind of like the marketplace and all of the different currencies in the game, I will have a video in the pinned comment here to kind of go more in depth. It's a little bit longer and it will explain things further, but to really sum it up, the marketplace in Diablo Immortal, it looks like it's all about gems and legendary gems. You'll see that there are also these things called runes, but those are basically just used as crafting material at the moment to go ahead and craft these legendary gems. Legendary gems in Diablo Immortal will only be able to be upgraded by getting multiple copies of the same gem to go ahead and put inside, and then that will go ahead and upgrade them. Now, in Diablo Immortal, legendary gems are not going to be guaranteed unless you use what's called a legendary crest. Right now in the shop, I'll show you guys a menu of what the shop looks like. The legendary crests are the most important thing that you can actually purchase that would be considered maybe as a pay for power. Again, we don't have the exact price in terms of how much do legendary crests cost in terms of real money. So to answer the question more about pay to win, there is a lot of placeholders even in the battle pass for things that we don't know about. As far as I can tell right now, they did keep to their word when they said that there is no pay for gear for your power. Like, you can't pay for extra magic find. However, you can definitely buy these legendary crests, which will grant you 100% chance for a legendary gem to actually drop, which would be basically the form of paying for power essentially in the game. Since the gems definitely give you power, it's raw damage, and there's also some gems that might grant you damage reduction or interactions, cooldowns, certain things like that. Now, it depends all on how high you can rank these gems. If the maximum limit of a gem is 100 plus, we're looking at getting way over 100 gems just to keep on getting, all of the upgrades for the gems, because going from rank 1 to rank 2, you just need one copy of a gem. From going rank 2 to 3, you're going to go ahead and need 2 copies of the same gem, and it exponentially starts getting higher and higher. What's the limit? What's the cap off for this? Because there's a point where, every player eventually will go ahead and be able to upgrade their gems to be at a reasonable level, but it depends on how high these gems scale, and to really answer the question, I don't know. No one actually knows how high the gems scale at the moment, as far as I'm aware of in the alpha, but it all depends on how high these gems can go, because if it goes not super high, then eventually most people will get some of these gems. But some of these gems, just as a heads up, seem to have a lower drop chance than other gems, but there definitely are going to be some gems that are more useful than others depending on the class or build that you play. But if you want more in-depth things and you want to see the entire battle pass, again, check the video down below, because I want to kind of condense this video. Anyways, as far as transmogging items, and that would be basically your cosmetics and changing the way it looks like in Diablo 3, you can just go ahead and go to the Enchantress and just change the way the item looks. Now, in Diablo Immortal, you cannot do this. They do plan to have a microtransaction where you're able to go ahead and buy a full entire skin for your class, and that would be something that would be purchased there. In terms of the skills that are available in the game, each class will have 12 skills. There's something called a primary skill, and those you can just spam for free. And then there are skills that are going to be your main skills that do a little bit more damage or interact a little bit differently. And those ones you'll be actually equipping, and those will have some sort of a cooldown. Or if it's a channeled ability, like for example, like Strafe, this would have technically a little energy bar or resource that would kind of be used. You can get things to modify the cooldowns as well as your channeled resource cost, or kind of how long some of these skills interact with some legendaries as well. But they do plan to add at least 2 more skills per class, and they also do plan to add more skills with post content. So that's something I'm definitely looking forward to. But the skills can definitely be changed with some legendaries, and I want to go ahead and kind of show you guys what I mean by that. And some of the skills are familiar, like you guys have maybe seen some skills from Diablo 3 that transferred over here, and there are some new ones. The skill over here is kind of like a ninja sword that you throw out, it's chakram, and you're going to go ahead and throw it out, and you can have it be catched, and you can actually go ahead and use the skill again without it actually being on cooldown, which is kind of cool. You can do that a few different times, but if you miss the chakram, like you don't pick it up with this little red line, if you don't stand and pick it up, then it will automatically go immediately onto cooldown. So there are kind of interesting skills with the game that are different and are more what I would consider interactive. But on top of that, you also can go ahead and, let's say, put in this legendary where it will completely change your skill. Now, if I go ahead and use Chakram, it's going to be a spitting blade around us. So it's not like Diablo 3 where you have plus like 10,000% damage to one skill, but it will go ahead and kind of modify the skill to give you maybe a little bit more damage, depending on, of course, what your build is. Maybe some of the skills might slow down your enemies, and that can kind of be more useful when you put a legendary gem that does more damage if they are affected by some type of controlled impairing effect or something like that. So there's a little bit more play with the legendary versus just raw damage. Now, in terms of the itemization, I'll have a video dedicated for this in the pinned comment as well. But to really sum it up, here's what the inventory screen looks like. You have on the left side your secondary gear slots, and on the right side you have your primary gear slots. With the secondary gear slots, you're going to be putting in up to 3 gems in each one of those. Gems would be the same as Diablo 3 gems, where it's just like plus to a certain attribute or something like that. But on the right side, which is the primary gear slots, you will be able to socket a legendary gem. Now in Diablo 3, you can put 3 legendary gems, unless you count the helm, which at that point, there is 1 legendary anniversary gem, but pretty much it's just 3 legendary gems for Diablo 3. And then with this game, you have 6 of them, and it all comes down to how powerful these gems are going to be, because keep in mind, they will have PvP for the game as well, but you can have 6 of them here. So obviously you want to rank up all your gems, and that's going to take quite a bit of time, as these gems don't drop that often unless you go ahead and put in that legendary crest. Will give you a 100% chance when you do a rift at the very end there will be a random gem to go ahead and obtain. But speaking of PvP, in the game right now there is technically PvP, but it's more so just party up with a bunch of people and everyone gets the rewards. That's kind of how people play right now. As in closed access, there's not that many people in certain areas at every single time, and the PvP is only once every 3 hours in its current form. I hope they do add a PvP like arena where you can queue up in like maybe 1v1s, 2v2s or something like that, and you could wager. That would be a really cool addition to the game, but I have no idea what else they plan for the PvP. But there is also going to be one more form of endgame content, which is going to be a large-scale PvE thing. They hinted towards it. I'll link the Reddit post down below, but they didn't really explain how that works. My guess is you party up with more than 4 players, and it's some sort of like event boss that you'll go ahead and actually be able to defeat. But also, in terms of the itemization, for those of you guys who are interested in maybe blue items or rare items to be viable, in this game it's very similar to Diablo 3. You just really want legendaries in every single one of your gear slots, and you'll be essentially upgrading your gear. And you can upgrade, like, let's say, rares, but then transfer over those stats to a legendary. So it's kind of nice that while you're leveling up, you can still upgrade your gear, and it will still be able to be transferred. And it does not cost anything to transfer your bonuses from one gear to another. So I'd say it's relatively beginner friendly, and all of the gear, as in like your chests, your weapons, none of those can be sold on the marketplace. The only thing that's really sold in the marketplace is gems and legendary gems, and also runes, but that's kind of tied to gems anyways. But as far as the game goes right now, there's no primals or ancient items. Legendaries are basically the top tier, and you're just going to be upgrading them. In terms of it having a PC port, this is a question that a lot of people are wondering. The game, unfortunately, is not going to have a PC port, at least as of right now. There's no plans for it. There's also the question of how long game time do you get. I run on a Samsung Galaxy S10, so you know your mileage may vary depending on what phone you have, but I'm getting about 2.5 hours, or technically if you're running this on like an iPad or a tablet, it all depends on your device, but that's about how long I got, 2.5 hours. And as far as the main question of is the game pay to win, no one can answer this question right now, and I think it's the most important thing that a lot of people want to know, and unfortunately we simply do not know, because there is a system right now where when you reach max level, you'll get what's called 1,000 eternal orbs every single day, which is a pretty decent amount, and you can buy a bunch of stuff in the marketplace. Specifically, the legendary crest in the shop menu is probably one of the best things to go ahead and actually obtain, and if you can get 3 of those per day, I think it's reasonable. But if they're going to give us, you know, a different amount in the game launches, I have no idea. Again, I'm just mentioning the things in the alpha state right now. But in terms of, what I do like about the game and I think things that can be improved on, I want to go ahead and establish this first, since I do create content for other action RPGs. Like, I've been doing playthroughs of Path of Exile, I've played through Wolcen, Torchlight 3, Last Epoch, and of course I've played all the Diablo games, and I still continually create content for even Diablo 2 when there are new updates with mods and stuff like that. So I'm not really a mobile game player, or I don't really play games on controller. However, with this game, I did happen to be playing on a controller. I'm not a fan of touchscreen controls, but the touchscreen controls definitely do work in this game. So if any of you guys were kind of hesitant because it was all of the game was basically either touchscreen, or if you happen to be playing on a tablet, some tablets will allow you just to have a controller. But this game doesn't natively support a controller, but it is something that they will be looking at. But I didn't have any problems with it. The game plays perfectly fine. In fact, if you want to stutter step, you can go ahead and be able to stutter step super easily by just holding down the attack and moving at the same time. The game will basically time things perfectly for you, so it is definitely easy to go ahead and play. Now, in terms of the difficulty, I would say the game is definitely harder than the normal difficulty of Diablo 3, but it's not as hard as Diablo 1 or 2. Those games are much more challenging in that aspect. And as far as the story goes, I'm definitely interested in the story. I did enjoy the campaign, at least what we could play. We basically get to play up until Act 3. We can reach level 45, and the gameplay that you guys are seeing in the background, all of it is max level gameplay. But a lot of stuff, and you end up doing repeating content. Like, you'll see some of the same areas that you will do after you go ahead and complete the game for these things called bounties, or if you go ahead and do these rifts, there are some like tile sets that might be familiar. Right now there's only 2 tile sets for the endgame Elder Rift system, but they plan to add more in the future as well. But as far as the itemization goes, this is one part where I personally would like there to be a little bit more play with the creative and innovation here. So let me go ahead and show you guys, this is an item in Path of Exile called Headhunter. It's a super rare item, but what it allows you to do is if you kill an elite monster, like a yellow monster, you'll gain some of its special abilities for a set amount of time. And I think that those ideas are a lot cooler, and in Diablo Immortal, you definitely have some abilities that can be modified with some legendaries. And I think that's kind of cool, but I want more game-changing things, like, for example, instead of maybe you don't have cooldowns, but you spend health as a percentage of whatever that cooldown would be in seconds as your maximum life. I think those kind of mechanics would be a lot more interesting to go ahead and see in the game, but that might not be their plan. They probably want this to be a easier game for casuals or people that maybe have never played a Diablo game to be able to pick up and play and not be super confused with some of these items that would be too game-changing. But that's what I enjoy. I like seeing innovation in action RPGs, and as far as the innovation, what's new with Diablo Immortal compared to other action RPGs, I already showed you guys the skills and how it works in this game. Instead of getting plus huge number to one skill, you can get a legendary in this game that grants you plus 10% damage to this specific skill, and that doesn't really feel legendary to me or unique, as in Diablo, you have some really unique items. And Diablo 3, we had the stone gauntlets that every time you would get hit, you would slow yourself down, but you get massive amount of armor. But then in return, you can go ahead and combo with something, let's say, like Ice Climbers, which makes it so you are immune to the negative effects of stone gauntlets. I like that idea of having certain things that would have awesome interactions, or like the Kanai's Cube, where you're able to go ahead and have a legendary without equipping it. Those are the things that I look forward to in a action RPG to really show off some of the potential and the creativity in the game's design. Now, in Diablo Immortal, most of the things play relatively safe with this. There's not anything insane as of right now. Keep in mind, it's in the alpha. Things, of course, could change. I would like them to add the Kanai's Cube, but I also want to see next-gen, gameplay, introductions to mechanics. But what it does offer is every skill in this game is kind of like DPS in a sense. As in, most of the time in most action RPGs, you kind of funnel yourself towards building towards one specific skill. And this game, it doesn't really let you do that. Sure, one skill can have 10% more damage, or you can modify it in a certain way, and it could be your favorite skill, but it's not going to be your only source of damage. In Diablo 3, you would build maybe let's say multi-shot, and that would only be your source of damage. The rest of your skills would only be, let's say, buffs or other things to go ahead and improve multi-shot damage, or it'll be some type of buff or some type of mobility, whereas this game, everything is kind of utilized, and it feels very interactive, like you're pushing all your buttons versus these are just buffs or auras that you put on, and this is your main DPS. So that's kind of what it does offer, and during some of the boss fights, there's a lot of interaction. Like, you'll definitely see that there's giant cones, or maybe like a line where the enemy is going to charge. Like, the game is very interactive, as in you need to move around for these boss fights, or they're charging up, you got to move out of this giant circle to avoid the attack, versus, again, in some action RPGs, the boss will sit there and he'll just kind of hammer away at you. So there is a little bit more interaction in that, and I do want to say that to give you guys some feedback as far as, like, you know, is this game any fun? Obviously that's subjective, and I want to try to stay objective with this video, but the thing that I could ask you is, did you enjoy Diablo 3? Because what this game feels like is kind of like a Diablo 3.5. Like, there's newer additions to the game. In some areas, the terrain, specifically the tile sets for the textures, definitely look next-gen for sure. In fact, some of them actually look very similar to Diablo 4, if you guys have seen the BlizzCon demo. Like, the floor looks really good, like the textures look really good, but the graphical style of the characters or the classes and some of the skills with some of the more brighter color palettes are definitely similar to what I would say Diablo 3, and overall I would say it's very similar to Diablo 3. It's very smooth, by the way, in terms of how smooth the game plays. I would say in its current state right now, the game feels like it's finished in terms of, like, is the game buggy? How is the stability of the game? It is pretty much flawless. I did run into like 1 or 2 issues where I got an issue where I got stuck, but if you go into the options menu, you can unstuck yourself, so it's not really a problem. But I only had that issue once, and I've grinded multiple characters to max level, so I would say that's pretty much a non-issue for the game. But in terms of things that I feel like the game could maybe improve upon, as well as like what I would give the game in terms of like a rating. Since the game is still in alpha, I'm going to use a system of a thumbs up, a sideways thumbs, or like a thumbs down, because I don't want to give a numerical value, as things, of course, are subject to change. But in terms of, is the game fun, that's obviously subjective, but I would say objectively, if you like Diablo 3, this is probably going to be a really good game for you. Now, it does kind of limit you on what you can do, as there are certain things that you might want to do that would be considered like it is your daily. You can only do this thing once, or in some of the shops that are tied to some of the currency that you'll be earning for free, you'll have a limit on how many you can purchase of, like, you know, these things called rare crests, which are going to grant you the ability to go ahead and do these rifts. That would be limited, so it kind of limits you on what you can do, especially since it is going to be a free-to-play game. That could be some type of a barrier for some people to be like, oh, I might not be interested in, you know, playing a game if it has dailies that I'm limited to my playtime for the game. But for me, that's kind of just how mobile games are. I'm not a mobile game player, but I understand gameplay mechanics of having a daily login for the retention rate. But in terms of limiting the player to play the game, I don't understand that. I know certain things need to be limited because they'll be too rewarding, but I know some people just want to slam rifts all day, and it will not be rewarding to go ahead and do that unless you have the legendary crest or even a rare crest. But I could say that graphic-wise, I would give it a huge thumbs up. In terms of the game's visuals, it looks pretty much like Diablo 3, which, in my personal opinion, Diablo 3 looked perfectly fine, and since this is on mobile, it looks better than almost anything on the mobile market right now in terms of, like, mobile games. I'm not a mobile game player, but I have checked out Anima, and I have checked out a game called Raziel, but I would say that this just blows those out of the water in terms of, like, visuals and some of, like, there's, like, these little intros for some of the stories. I won't play it because I don't want to spoil the story for anyone, but in terms of the story right now, it's kind of still developing. I won't, again, spoil it, but there are returning people from previous Diablo games, which, as a huge Diablo fan, I'm excited to see some of these characters that I do remember when I played through the game. But a story, I would say, it's kind of up in the air in terms of, like, how it is. But in terms of the game being dark, because a lot of people were afraid that since it is a mobile game, are they going to tone down the game's violence? And I would say the game didn't really tone down the violence at all. There are still impaled people, there's still hanging corpses, there's still blood in the game. I wouldn't say they toned down the violence in this game. It's still, right now, as a download, it has it as a teen rating, which I'm honestly pretty surprised by. Now, it's not as dark as, you know, some of the things in Diablo 1, like, if you guys remember this.
All that awaits you is the wrath of my master. You are too late to save the child. Now you will join him in hell.
And that kind of stuff was really awesome, specifically remembering the Butcher as well from Diablo 1. Those felt very iconic and very dark, especially since I played those games at a very young age. But at the same time, there are definitely interactive bosses. And on top of that, there's another thing that I want to go and mention, which are these rift modifiers. Here's kind of what they look like. So they'll kind of affect the game, and they're trying to make the game more difficult and sometimes even easier. You can get these by putting in crests inside of the Elder Rift when you go and enter in. It's almost like a PoE map modifier, but honestly, a lot of times I felt like I didn't really even notice them. Another thing that I think could maybe get some extra bonuses is the charm system. As of right now, it's basically +1 rank, or you can go technically up to higher ranks on a certain skill. It's kind of like Diablo 2 charms in the sense where you'd be able to go ahead and get a free extra stat point into a skill, but in this game you don't really have stat points to put in into skills. Instead, it's just going to give you basically extra damage, or here's kind of an idea of what it would look like. It's like plus to a specific number in terms of damage. It's like basically over here what I highlighted over in the red. But I think charms could maybe actually add a little bit more to the game as well. Maybe certain things can roll on a charm when they go ahead and drop, not only in addition to these plus bonus skill points in the game. But there's also a system in the game where they have these things that you can buy with your eternal orbs, which are going to be these modifiers to re-roll certain things on items. I have a more in-depth video on it, but basically what it comes down to is the ones that you can buy in the Microtransaction shop. They will have a more of a smaller pool of what can roll on the item versus just rolling everything like you would just with the regular like free reforged stone, if that's gonna make any sense. But I would still say that the game holds true to Diablo 3 in terms of how dark it is. So if that was like kind of a decision that you were looking at in terms of like playing it for its dark lore, that's where it would land on the Diablo scale. It does take place in between Diablo 2 and 3, but also there are some areas in the game where it will take place in between Diablo 1 and 2, which is kind of interesting. I won't spoil it for you guys, but you will see some other things in between Diablo 1 and 2 in the game. But in terms of the game's visuals, like I said, it's pretty much thumbs up for me. I think that we can objectively say that it looks really good for a mobile game. And in terms of bugs, huge thumbs up. Once again, I didn't have issues with the game like crashing or anything like that. And in gameplay wise, I would say it plays very smooth. Things definitely feel responsive. I want to say that the servers right now for the alpha are on the East Coast, because I'm at almost 100 ping. I'm on the West Coast. Obviously, when the game launches, they'll probably have West Coast servers, but depending on where you are at for the alpha, you can have some latency. But I wouldn't say that that's the game itself. That's just because, one, I'm playing obviously on wireless, because that's how we're playing right now, as we don't have access to running it correctly on an emulator right now, and there's no PC port planned. But again, once they release servers for, like, let's say the West Coast, that would kind of help out some of the responsiveness for the extra latency that I'm currently having. But I wouldn't say that's a problem at all. As far as itemization in the game, I would kind of give it a sideways. The reason why I give it a sideways, and this is not something that would be considered good or bad for everyone. It kind of depends on, you know, what you want in an action RPG. For the itemization of the game, I would say it's very casual oriented. Like, this thing has more damage, go ahead and equip this. It has more numbers, versus more theory crafting and more interesting ideas that I would love to see in the itemization department. Like, for example, I would love for us to be able to go ahead and have a legendary item that disables our potion, so we can't even use our potion, but instead we get another skill. Those are the things that I'm looking for. Again, I mentioned before, like, you know, cool things like, you know, the stone gauntlets and ice climbers in itemization to go ahead and try to prioritize other things in the game versus just like numbers, if that kind of makes sense. And I kind of tried with the system of modifying a skill with some legendaries, but I think that there could be more room for creativity. And even with the newer Paragon tree, which if you guys want to check out a video going over all the things in the Paragon tree, that will be pinned down below as well. But I definitely think that they could do some more innovation in terms of complexity with the game, but that might not be their plan. And you know, that's okay, because remember, you know, some people, they look at games like Path of Exile. I get this all the time when I show off as a Diablo content creator, when I show off other games like, you know, Last Epoch, I'm like, every single skill in this game has its own skill tree. It freaks some people out, and they're like too overwhelming, and they lose interest in wanting to play it. So I get that, especially for a mobile game, but I personally like complexity, so this one's definitely subjective. But I would love to see them advance the Paragon system and make the skills just more than just like +% damage or +% damage reduction or just granting yourself armor. I would like to see more more innovative things that are completely game-changing for a class or a build. But in terms of the story, I would say it's kind of undetermined as I could not finish it, but I would say that it held my interest. And for the story, they do have voice acting. I would say the voice acting is like AAA quality. It's basically Diablo 3 for the the story department as of right now. Again, I don't know the ending as no one does in the alpha right now. We can only get up to pretty much like Act 3, but I would say overall it's better than what I've seen in mobile games, so that would be a thumbs up in my book for the story, especially since I did like seeing some of the characters from previous Diablo games come in. In terms of the audio, I would say the audio is really good in this game as well. A lot of it is basically Diablo 3 sounds. There's some Diablo 2 sounds as well, and there's a lot of Diablo 3 music, and there are some original sounds in the game as well. A lot of the stuff is actually same stuff that you've seen in Diablo 3, like some of the skills and again some of the audios and some of the voice lines. I think they redid some of the voice acting, like they had someone else do it, but it's the same like quote or something like that that you would hear from the previous Diablo games. So overall, I would say the audio is great. In terms of monetization, that's an unknown. That's not even a sideways. That's legitimately unknown. As this is an important feature for you know, anyone interested in playing a mobile game. Again, a lot of people want to know what's the pay to win like. I have a dedicated video that goes over everything, but it really comes down to the gems. If you want to min-max in maybe pushing greater rifts, if you play Diablo 3, you know that gems are a huge part of your character, as if you don't have gems upgraded, you're not going to be able to progress in the game in terms of min-maxing. Now, as far as the story goes, you can definitely complete everything in the alpha without upgrading your gems, and that's totally fine. However, if you want to go ahead and maybe play PvP, or you want to push leaderboards, this could be concerning, as gems are definitely going to be, you know, something to take into consideration, as you can upgrade them, and it does give you raw damage. But for me, I would say a great monetization system, you know, since, you know, it's in early access in the alpha right now. I would say cosmetics, most people are pretty okay with. If they sold wings, that'd be totally fine. And if they made a pet that picked up gold, I don't think people would care about it that much, or a pet that automatically picked up items. In fact, right now, you can go into settings and auto pick up your items already by walking over them. But if they make a pet like kind of just do it for you, or just make it so, you know, that is another option, I think that that would be a great monetization system, as, you know, it really wins over the players that were worried about this game's monetization. But for right now, again, it just really comes down to, it seems like these gems are going to be what's monetized in the game. Now, a big part of criticism that I can give for the game that I think really needs to be fixed, since you cannot buy XP or you cannot buy Magic Find potions in the game, they gate your progression in the game. There's a certain point where when you're doing the campaign, because when you start off the game, you're going to do the campaign, and then you're going to want to do endgame content. That's usually how Diablo games work, or any action RPG, in fact. But they gate your progression, and they'll say, like, at some point, it'll be like, reach level 40, or reach level 45 to progress the story. And it feels weird. I think the idea and the intention is to make it so people want to go ahead and try out these other systems, as in, they're going to go ahead and do bounties, they're going to go ahead and do rifts to try to level up and learn the new mechanics. But I think that for most players, they're going to feel kind of disrupted while they're just going through the campaign. They have this, you know, a story that they're trying to go ahead and do, and then it's like, reach level 45, and then you have to like go back and do like older content, doing bounties in, you know, previous acts. It just feels like it doesn't need to be there, especially since they don't sell XP boosts. What's the point, in my personal opinion, in terms of game design, to gate the player's story progression by going ahead and just saying, reach this level? It just feels abrupt, and it just feels like they could definitely make it so you can complete the story and then go ahead and experience the in-game content and then do the repetitive stuff, as that's kind of how action RPGs are. I just feel like it's completely unnecessary. But I would also really like to see again, more innovation with the game. If they even add like the Herodric Cube and we have cool crafting recipes, that would be something to take into consideration as well. And I would really like to see rares be more viable, as it is right now. Pretty much, if it's not a legendary, how I see it is I am literally just going to salvage it. It's just like salvage all. That's kind of maybe the system that they want for kind of progressing the game in a very slow fashion, where you're always going to get, you know, items that drop, and you're going to be able to go ahead and upgrade your items in the game. And that's okay for some people, but I feel like there should be a reason to go ahead and look at your items. Otherwise, once you get, like, you know, max level, almost everything that drops, it's like a blue or a yellow, is just, it's just fodder for your crafting materials. But that's the way that it's implemented, and it's probably done so to simplify the game, versus some people not understanding that, like, a rare can be better than a unique or a legendary in the game. But I think that this is a huge thing that the Diablo community has been wanting for a while, where, again, yellows are a little bit more viable. But they've been trying to do that with Diablo 4, but that's a topic for another day. But anyways, to kind of go ahead and wrap things up, we'd really like to see more depth with the game personally, as I like my complexity in action RPGs. but that doesn't mean the game is not fun. And I did have quite some fun playing the game for several hours on, again, multiple, reaching max level as multiple classes. I do feel like the endgame needs a couple more things. They do mention that there is going to be one more form of endgame content, so I'm looking forward to kind of testing that out, but we'll have to wait and see what that has, as that's supposed to be some type of PvE thing. I think that one thing that would be really cool for endgame content as a content creator and as someone that does like to stream on Twitch, to do the same PvE stuff over and over, especially since you are limited. It's kind of hard to stream the game for, like, 8 hours a day, even though, like, I'm playing this on a big monitor because I'm hooking my phone up to an HDMI out. I'm not having, like, any fatigue playing the game in terms of, like, my arms being cramped, because I understand that is something that a lot of people have been complaining about, because, this game, as an action RPG, you want to play for several hours, but sometimes the game kind of limits you in what you can do. Maybe that's intentionally designed that way, but I could definitely see this game being quite popular if they made a PC port, so that's something I have as a suggestion for them. But anyways, that's going to go ahead and pretty much wrap things up. Would like to see more innovation overall with the game, but again, that's probably due to simplicity. But you guys can let me know your thoughts on the game if you've played it or if you watched it, and definitely check some of the videos down below, as there's a lot more in-depth mechanics that I did not explain in this video, but I wanted to go ahead and make a condensed video, even though this one's still relatively long. I just want to go ahead and wrap up everything into one thing and give some feedback for the game. So overall, the game is playing really smooth, and I did have a great time, and if you enjoyed Diablo 3, this could definitely be something to look forward to. But if you want something super deep in terms of depth, like Path of Exile, where you're able to go ahead and customize and use cluster jewels, build your own skill tree, this is more of a light game, and I would say that it has less complexity than Diablo 3 in some areas, but more complexity, let's say, in the Paragon tree. But eventually with the Paragon tree, you're just going to put all 400 points into everything. But that's the way the game currently looks right now. But anyways, thanks for watching, guys, and if you enjoyed the video, drop a like on it, and if you're new here and do want to keep up to date with Diablo Immortal, as well as other Diablo and other action RPG and heck, just gaming content in general, if you subscribe from the bell, you'll definitely see more in the future. But take care, and I'll catch you on the next video, and I'm signing out. Peace.